Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Sylvanus Olympio of Togo, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Félix Moumié of Cameroon, and Amir Kakabal of Guinea-Bissau. They all have many things in common. One of the first common points is that they were all African fighters who energetically engaged in the struggle for the continent's independence and the effective liberation of African peoples. The second common point, which is much sadder, is that they were all assassinated. Officially, of course, by Western powers. These are verified facts that everyone knows, not conspiracy theories. If you are new to this YouTube channel, know that I have already made a video about the poisoning of Félix Moumié, the Cameroonian leader who fought for his country's independence. You can find the video somewhere here. I also made a video about the Congo case and a brief note on the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. I'm also preparing a video about Sylvanus Olympio. If this speaks to you, don't hesitate to subscribe. Now let's dive into the main topic. Today I will tell you the story of a man, an African leader who is well known, someone you probably know, who fought for the continent's independence for a long time. He also fought for unity across the continent and for decolonization. He became the first president of his nation. Sadly, he faced a much more tragic fate, we might say. The story of Kwame Nkrumah begins now. We are in August, during the time of Kwame Nkrumah's discovery. Kwame Nkrumah is returning from a visit to the continent, his plane lands. As usual on the continent, officials are on the tarmac waiting for him, and as was customary, a young girl arrives with a bouquet of flowers. Except that, at the moment we hear an explosion, the bouquet was rigged. The girl had a bomb hidden in her flowers. She died immediately. Kwame Nkrumah lived.
He was hit. The girl who gave him flowers died right away. He was struck by fragments of the grenade.
Clearly, it would be natural for you to wonder why this man, whom I portray as a Pan-Africanist, a good president, a benevolent man for his people, escaped an attempt on his life in his country. To understand all this, we really need to go back to the beginning of the story. Kwame Nkrumah was born in a small village in the southwest of the Gold Coast, now Ghana, which was a British colony at the time. He came from a very modest family. Despite everything, he succeeded in getting a formal education and became a teacher at 21. In May of 35, a real opportunity arose for him to study in the United States. So, he went to the US, and once in the land of Aung San, he truly committed himself to the struggle for independence, for awakening, for the liberation of African peoples, particularly among students. So, he took concrete actions until he arrived in Great Britain to continue his work. Therefore, the organizations and events for African independence are really priorities. In order to paint the picture, let's imagine ourselves in the year of 1945 or possibly 1946, specifically during the evening of the Second World War. At that time, African peoples were increasingly demanding independence. They needed leaders to guide them in this struggle. Naturally, Kwame Nkrumah came back to his homeland, and upon his return, he continued to demonstrate with them, leading to his arrest. Interestingly, prison could have weakened him. It became a catalyst for him because all the elements came together to make him a truly successful politician. At that time, he was very educated, which was quite rare on the continent. In addition to that, he had a struggle that was truly the struggle of the people, namely independence. Plus, he was imprisoned. Though it was brief, the people saw him as a hero to come. So when he was released in 1949, he founded his party, the CPP, Convention People's Party. Naturally, the CPP aimed for the country's independence. It is in this context that legislative elections were organized, resulting in a significant victory. This would compel Britain to grant independence to Ghana. Thus, shortly after, Kwame Nkrumah would become Prime Minister, and later, in 1960, he would become President. The first President of Ghana, the independent nation of Ghana. During that specific period, the country was not referred to as Ghana, but rather as the Gold Coast. As soon as the Gold Coast became independent, the first thing Kwame Nkrumah did was change the country's name. He named the country Ghana. Thus we are in independent Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah is discussed as the savior, the man who would deliver independence, the man who would accomplish great things. At such a moment, Ghana would truly become a landmark for all those fighting against the oppressions of Western powers. Malcolm X would pass through. Other iconic figures of the struggle would visit Accra. But things weren't perfect in Kwame Nkrumah's story. The people criticized him because there were economic crises that created tensions. In fact, let's say this is the official version. This is the official story. If you read about Kwame Nkrumah online, you'll see he is often portrayed as oppressing the opposition. Economically, it was a big disaster. Not everything is true. Let me explain. Nkrumah came in as president. He may not have been a perfect president, but he took concrete actions. He built schools. He made education free. He constructed roads. He constructed cultural centers. He genuinely enhanced sectors like fishing and agriculture. Cocoa production, which is truly the flagship sector of Ghana's economy, doubled. Gold mining also increased. It was boosted. So you can see that Kwame Nkrumah took lasting actions for his country to have a strong economy. He also financed a large dam, whose name I forgot. I'll add the name in a graphic. All these actions turned him into a president who struggled for his country to genuinely achieve an enviable economic status that could be envied. But Kwame Nkrumah's problem was that he was obsessed with Pan-Africanism.
For unity must be the key to our actions. Our foes are numerous, and they are ready to pounce on and use our deep weakness.
Kwame Nkrumah sought that African countries be united. African nations should act in unison, have one army and one currency. If you know your African history, a European president tried this. It was Gaddafi recently, and you can see how Gaddafi ended. He was murdered. Coincidence? I don't think so. Thus, through all his actions, Kwame Nkrumah quickly became, if you will, the target to beat for many people. Already at the continental level, many presidents did not view him favorably. Who knows why? Because they saw him a bit like a communist. Conversely, the United States and England looked at all these actions with great disapproval. Back then, as now, if you oppose the US, you are either a terrorist or a communist. And very clearly, Kwame Nkrumah had a target on his back. So, the situation quickly became a bit complicated. All the effort he invested in Pan-Africanism sent Ghanaian troops across the continent, which made security for the country somewhat fragile. At its own level was a bit fragile, to the point that he escaped numerous assassination attempts. Additionally, the construction of this well-known dam demanded many agencies to put the country into debt. So, there was indeed a climate, if you will, that made the people increasingly reluctant to hear his name. Therefore, he became less popular, so we can say there were tensions. However, that was insufficient to justify what happened next. On the other hand, the CIA financed many assassination attempts against him, obviously with local complicity. Kwame Nkrumah experienced a reign that was extremely complicated, and one day, while he was on a political trip to China, he became a victim of a coup d'etat in his absence, and he left power just like that. He could never go back to his homeland. He took refuge in Guinea with Sékou Touré. It's worth noting that on the continent there weren't many leaders who supported Kwame Nkrumah. Even though he created the OAU with 32 African countries in it, there weren't many presidents who supported him wholeheartedly. Sékou Touré, Amilcar Cabral, and a few other leaders. Amilcar Cabral even gave a moving speech after Kwame's death. Nkrumah,
In his final public speech in Conakry at the funeral of Nkrumah, he denounced the betrayal that undermines African movements.
We do not weep either, the people of Ghana, wronged in its most beautiful achievements, in its truest aspirations. We do not grieve for Africa's betrayal either. We weep, yes, with anger, toward those who were able to betray Nkrumah in the vile service of imperialism.
Anyway, the following coup meant Kwame Nkrumah could no longer go back to his country. He would then seek refuge in exile with his friend, his counterpart, Sékou Touré, who kindly offered him asylum. He would live there for quite some time until he passed away from cancer. In Romania, he went to receive treatment. I also want to highlight that Sékou Touré helped several presidents. I am not trying to glorify Sékou Touré because I know he is a president with suspicions of massacre and all. But in any case, in the fight for Pan-Africanism, he was a support for Félix Oumié, for example, who was poisoned. He supported Amilcar Cabral. He also backed Kwame Nkrumah. So, He lived in Guinea until his final hours when he was affected by cancer. He traveled to England for care. It was there that he died. I share this story for a reason. Kwame Nkrumah is a figure who authored many pieces that are notable in African literature. He laid the groundwork for Pan-Africanism. He fought for the liberation and independence of the African continent. Yet when you read about Kwame Nkrumah, he is often shown as a president who did wrong by his people. Yet when you investigate further, you can see that it was a campaign of demonization carried out at the time by the CIA and Western states against those discontented with certain countries in the Eastern Bloc of the East. Yet Kwame Nkrumah is a man who battled for the continent, who truly envisioned a united, powerful, and genuinely independent Africa. Nobody is perfect. He was not an ideal president. I doubt we have a perfect leader on the continent. But Kwame Nkrumah, that's it. He is a man who fought for his country, who fought for his continent. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to subscribe. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Please go ahead and subscribe. My documentary is almost done. The episodes will be released